This is the 37th winter John Owen has spent on the slopes of Plynlimon. He is now 64 years old. At the turn of the year, when blizzards start to threaten and the sheep seek shelter from the wind, they must regularly be chased out onto more exposed ground. If the shepherd lets them collect in a hollow, a heavy fall of snow can easily bury them, and they may starve or suffocate. The scant winter pasture on these high sheep walks provides only the poorest nourishment. It takes 3 acres to support 1 sheep. Only the hardiest of the flock of pregnant ewes remain on the mountain till lambing time, and even they could barely survive without a regular provision of cereal blocks. By the end of January, half the flock has been removed down country to the care of a second shepherd who belongs to another generation of farm workers. Despite his youth, Erwyd Howells is firmly committed to a traditional way of life.
Sometimes it does come back to you that people have been doing the same job as you've been doing for the last couple of centuries, and it very often puzzles me what they were thinking and what their attitude was. And in those days, some of them, they had no English at all. And although many English phrases and words have penetrated, I think it's only just on the surface.
This is the home farm to the mountain sheep walks on Plynlimon, a dozen miles away. Its original name was Jac y Bugail, which changed over the years to an equally romantic English form, Love's Grove. Love's Grove House has been the home of the Evans family for a century and a half. But Christopher Evans is the first career farmer, the first to look upon the family's land as a commercial enterprise. The day-to-day management of the farm is in the hands of the bailiff, Tom Jones. Tom and his family occupy a farmstead across the way from Love's Grove House, which is the center of operations for the lowland section of Christopher Evans's property. 500 acres of mixed arable and grassland in and around the Rydal Valley. The difference in altitude between these meadows and the mountain pastures is as much as 2,400 feet. The contrast in climate is just as pronounced, and even on the lower slopes at Llerne Adai, where John Owen lives, the winters are long and fierce. John has twice been married. He has children and grandchildren. Nowadays he lives completely alone, a mile from his nearest neighbor, 3 miles from the nearest village. As a young man, he worked on the eastern side of Plynlimon, where conditions can be even harsher. He changed his employer and moved over to this western side after the appalling winter of 1947.
Many in the summertime, you know, they envy and say, oh, you're lucky to live up here, but I always tell them you should be here winter, telling them. Yes. Anyhow, the shepherding came ruined then, and me went up to the source of the Wye, you know. We had this cup of tea about 3 o'clock, and we were sitting very near each other, and it was so dark, you know, the blizzard came down, you know, and we couldn't see one another, you know. So dark, like, and we started off for home straight away, you know, down following the river, we could hear it, we couldn't see nothing at all, and we could see the dogs walking ahead of us. It was 9 o'clock at night when I landed down the mountain, you know. And I wasn't very as young in those days, and damn good job could stick it like.
Lambing comes late on Plinlimmon. Not till April can the weather be trusted to give the lambs a fighting chance of surviving their first weeks of life. From this sheltered southern extremity, the mountain farm stretches a good 4 miles across country to the northeast. Every day, John Owen walks about 1,000 of the 3,000 acres in his charge, covering the same ground roughly twice each week. He cannot always be on hand to assist a weak lamb or an incompetent mother. Consequently, it's only the stronger, more experienced ewes in the flock who are left to lamb on the hill, while their younger or less sturdy counterparts give birth in more manageable circumstances down at Love's Grove.
Wait, stay, do that.
Each ewe which loses her lamb becomes a potential adoptive mother. Much of Erwyd Howells' work at this time of year is concerned with adoption, separating twin lambs and adopting one of them to a spare ewe who will be able to give it the necessary nourishment to grow to a sturdy maturity. It's always the stronger of a pair of lambs which is taken, the one most able to withstand the temporary distress and deprivation of the adoption process. A mother recognizes her lamb largely by its particular scent. If her lamb dies and its skin can be tailored to fit another, the smell of the skin will convince her that this new lamb is her own flesh and blood. The adoptive ewe is penned up with the new lamb for at least a day, so that she may grow accustomed to it and come to accept it as her own. Erwyd must be always on the watch for ewes which need assistance in giving birth. In this case, one of the lamb's front legs has doubled back and caught inside its mother. It's important that the ewe should regain her feet as soon as possible after an assisted birth. It shows the shepherd that she's suffered no ill effects. He's also anxious to see the lamb begin to suckle, since its own bodily resources will not keep it alive for more than half a day. At this stage, a lamb born at Love's has a better chance of survival than one of its mountain cousins. On the open hill, losses are at least 10% higher. It's a question partly of care, partly of climate, and partly of attacks by foxes. If a fox's earth is discovered, farmers and shepherds for miles around will come to help dig it out. It's an excellent way of combining sport, mutual economic interest, and plain good neighborly fun.
Wait a minute! Come on, lad. Come on. Come on, lads. Come on. Come on, lad. Come on. Come on. Keep an eye there in case
As it happened, this time the vixen and all but 2 of her cubs got away, and the mountain was scarcely rendered any safer. By the beginning of May, the Love's-Grove flock must be gathered together and shipped up to Plinlimmon. The working dogs in this part of the world are bred for a hard life on the open hill, where they must think for themselves. They're a different race from the docile collies who take prizes at sheepdog trials. And if their independent spirit gets a little out of hand when the spring fever rises in them, well, a month-old lamb is quite up to giving them a run for their money.
Oh, they weren't there. They won anyway.
Damn you! Yeah.
Oh, yeah, one.
Yeah. Right there.
Yeah, everyone.
Carol, that's you.
For the journey up to the mountain, the lambs must be separated from their mothers for the first time in their short lives, since, in a lorry crowded with ewes, a lamb could easily be smothered or crushed. All the same, it's a circumstance which neither party accepts without protest. While the lowland flock is hauled up country, the lambs which have been born on the hill need to be gathered for counting and marking. Traditionally, this is an occasion for mutual help between neighbors. It's Erwyd's job to start off the gathering from the top of the mountain once the others have taken up strategic positions below, waiting to join in the drive as he pushes the sheep downhill towards them. John waits at the bottom in accordance with custom. It's the older men who take the lower positions on the hill. Next up the slope is his neighbor Tom Morgan, then another neighbor, Rhys Jones. And above him, Alan Thomas has already passed over the skyline out of sight. In its 3,000 acres of mountain, the farm combines 5 distinct sheep walks: Llaer neu Addau, Enhafod, Nant y Moch, Maes Nant, and Nant y Llyn. Their traditional boundaries go back way beyond their present grouping under one ownership. Today, each area is still gathered separately, but all the sheep are now brought into the pens at Maes Nant, a modern structure built to replace a much older farm, which was drowned during the flooding of the Nant y Moch reservoir.
Length now rather than the width.
The last of the lambs from Love's Grove have arrived on the mountain. For each truck full of lambs, 3 trips have to be made loaded with ewes, and the timetabling is crucial. If a ewe and her lamb are separated longer than half a day, they may fail to re-establish the maternal bond which is essential to the lamb's survival at this age. The work of marking the lambs goes on for a week. For most of the young rams, marking also involves castration. It ensures that they will grow into tender fat lambs ready for slaughter next winter. The castration pincers look deceptively formidable. They do not in fact cut the lamb, and they represent the most hygienic and least painful method available. The term marking derives from the ear mark, which is clipped out of the lamb's ears and identifies it for life with this particular farm. In addition, each lamb gets a paint mark, blue for a castrated male, red for a female. Until recently, the 5 sheep walks had individual earmarks, but the farm has now standardized on one, known as the 3-cut notch. Of the 900 or so ram lambs, 30 have been left uncastrated and are given a distinguishing red paint mark on the tail. Roughly a half of these may eventually be kept for breeding. As the dry summer took hold, Love's Grove acquired a sunburned appearance. Prue Evans, Christopher's wife, is passionately fond of horses and keeps a small breeding stud in the grounds of the house. Prue and Christopher's son, Mark, represents the 6th generation of Evanses at Lovesgrove. His great-grandfather, Brigadier General Lewis Pugh Evans, was the most decorated soldier in Wales. He's still fondly remembered in the neighbourhood as an old-style, benevolent country gentleman.
My grandfather wasn't really concerned with farming for the majority of his life, and my great-grandfather wasn't either, really. But they accumulated land over a period of years, and I've taken it on myself, really, to make that land, you know, work for me. Basically, we try to run the two together as one unit. The idea being that the animals live on the hill farm in the summer, taking advantage of the grass that's, you know, grows fairly naturally up there in the summer, and we, in the meantime, make the winter fodder and what have you, and fatten the produce down here on the grass that grows down here in the summer. So the two are sort of tied up together, really, in the old traditional way things have been going in this part of the world for a very long time. It's called the Havard and Henry system. The cattle, as well as increasing the production of the farm by a very significant amount, probably 100% above what it was before, also provide a very useful role by improving the ground up on the mountain. There's an awful lot of this sort of rough hill grass, the long type, the millennia, and the sheep won't eat that at all. That's basically what the cattle live on up there. And by chewing it down, the sheep will then go and make use of the shorter stuff.
In the first week of July comes shearing. The shearing team are contractors who spend the summer crossing the country farm by farm on a schedule which hardly changes from year to year, whereas the catchers and handlers are mostly casual labourers hired by the day. Shearing week is no longer the relaxed and sociable occasion it once was on these quiet hills. The adult flock, including yearling ewes and breeding rams, amounts to more than 3,000 sheep, and they are processed at the rate of 1,000 fleeces a day. If shearing is tough for the men, it puts even more stress on the sheep. The noise, the heat, the rough handling, and a day without food can bring on an exhausted condition known as handling tetany. The remedy is a massive injection of calcium compound.
Come on, baby.
Years ago, wool production was the most lucrative aspect of sheep farming. But today, that's no longer the case. At less than £1 per fleece, the wool check for this flock adds up to a relatively small sum of money compared with an annual turnover on the farm of £85,000. The end of shearing comes as a welcome respite in the year's work. For a few weeks, the sheep really can be left to safely graze, and a peaceable relaxation settles on the hill. North of Plinlimmon lies the Green Desert, a region of complete depopulation. Erwyd Howells has a special interest in the life that people led here, not so very long ago.
One of the biggest events in about 1934 in this area was that a lorry came up from Achantles to fetch a load of wool from the neighbouring farm here, and the road has gone so bad today. They used to look after it a little in that time, and that you couldn't take anything there today, and that was a very, very big event. There used to be a lot of people coming here for shearing in those yards over there, and you get about 30 or 40 people coming with between the wool packers and the shearers, catchers, and the people who are doing the gathering. That's gone again into the past. The family that used to live in the further up the valley here, they were distant relatives of mine, and they came from Cwmystwyth. And the head of the family died shortly after coming here, and 15 of his workmates from Cwmystwyth came to carry the coffin down to the chapel. They walked about 15 miles from Cwmystwyth up to here, down to the chapel in Nantymoch, and then they had to walk back again that night to Cwmystwyth. And there was a very, very heavy snow at that time. They had to drag the coffin over the snow, which, as far as comradeship goes, I think goes a long way.
At the height of the summer drought, Nantymoch Reservoir dried up and uncovered the remains of the drowned settlement where Erwyd's relative was buried. When the valley was flooded, its population had dwindled to just 2 elderly shepherds who now lie amid the transplanted graves of their tiny community in a corner of the chapel yard at Ponterwyd, the nearest village. In recent times, the chapel has declined in importance as a centre of community life all over rural Wales. All the same, in Ponterwyd, the village Eisteddfod still takes place at the chapel, and the Eisteddfod is certainly the major social event of the summer. It starts with children's classes soon after lunch, and the adult competition can go on into the early hours of the next day.
Rydw i gartre. Dyna'r unig ffordd o'i ddweud. Rydw i'n perthyn symud a bod yn o fi.
Erwyd's wife, Mary, is particularly anxious to hear the next contestant, who lives near their home in Capel Madog. The day following Ponterwyd Eisteddfod, there was an agricultural show at Llangurig, a dozen miles up the road, which is as far from home as John Owen is likely to stray in the course of a year. The sheep on show are Kerrys, a breed well suited to the gentle country just here, but they wouldn't fare at all well on the mountain. This isn't a large or ambitious show, but it makes a friendly occasion for the farming community at just the right time of year. John bumped into his son-in-law's father.
Oh, wacht je.
Ja, ja.
Oh, hanner awr yn wedi union.
ja.
Dan toen we dog fan hyn.
Ja, hanner awr.
Ja.
Ja, ja.
O, met de neer, dat beest je voor al geleden, no?
Oh, gaan door. Ja, maar die was heel leuk, Tom.
Nee.
The central event of the show is always the sheepdog trial. And with such a knowledgeable audience, it must take a fair amount of nerve to enter. Perhaps it was the effect of the exceptionally hot weather, but somehow the day never looked like producing any outstanding performances. Come the third week in August, work sets in again in earnest. This will be the last big gathering of the hill. From now on, the flock will be divided up and its constituent parts will start to go their separate ways. After weeks of peaceful grazing on the hill, it must come as a shock to be plunged unceremoniously into a pungent solution of sheep dip. Since the 1950s, dipping had been left to the individual discretion of farmers. But this year it was reintroduced by government order following an outbreak of the disease known as scab. The first to be dipped are the 900 castrated ram lambs, now known as wethers. At this stage, all the lambs must be separated from their mothers so that the ewes' milk supply will dry up. Unless this is done, the ewes will not come into season at the right time to begin the next breeding cycle in the autumn. At 4 months old, the wether lambs already weigh a good 40 pounds each. They are now to be transported down to Lovesgrove, where they will be put onto progressively richer pasture for another 3 or 4 months until they've grown heavy enough to be slaughtered. The dry summer has parched the grazing at Loves Grove, but that's almost an advantage for the wethers, since too rapid a change from mountain pasture to meadow grass could have a harmful effect on their condition. Another part of the flock to be brought down from Plinlimon are the draft ewes, which are due to be sold. They are 4-year-old ewes, which are still perfectly fit for breeding, but might not prove spry enough to withstand another winter on the mountain. Before they're sold, the Loves Grove tags have to be removed from their ears. The color of the tag provides a quick reference for the ewe's year of birth, but the traditional foolproof method of assessing a sheep's age is by counting its teeth.
This ewe was about 4.5-year-old, and she got a full set of teeth, 8 teeth. At present, those are the first 2 that she had after the baby, after the milk teeth, and these on the side, then the 3rd set, and this is the last tooth she'll ever have. And this is a very good sound ewe.
Erwyd's home is called T Capel, the chapel house. It's built onto an isolated country chapel, Capel Madog, 2 miles from Loves Grove. This year, for the first time, Erwyd has bought 2 of his employer's soundest draft ewes. He's going to keep them on a small patch of land at the bottom end of the chapel graveyard. Whether this embryonic flock is simply a pastime, or whether it's the start of a sheep farming empire, Erwyd is certainly not telling anyone.
In my mind, I believe there's an untapped source of wealth in hill farming in the future, and it can be brought up to date very much more than it is now, and where the sheep, there will be shepherds. There again, it's some people have interest in agriculture, but they don't take shepherding. It's very few people take up that line, and well, it's a lonely job, and it can be sometimes hard, and it's more or less pleasurable to me all the while. There's a certain peace there. There's something that is lacking down country. In Loves Grove, there's too many hedges there, and you can see the boundaries, but working on the hill is definitely the best.
On September the 7th, all the hillmen came to Machynlleth for the annual ewe sale of the Welsh Mountain Sheep Society. Christopher Evans' farm lies on the southern edge of the established territory of the true hardy Welsh mountain breed.
Here we are, the next lot.
Christopher has brought only the best 300 of his draft ewes for auction, and they should fetch better than average prices.
£12. At 12. 11 you mean? 11 I mid, 11 I mid, lem, 11 I mid, lem, 10, lem 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 10, 20, lem 20, lem 20, lem 20 I mid, lem 20, lem 20, lem 20, lem 20, lem 20, it's on the far end now, lem 20 I mid, lem 20, 30, lem 30.
As it turned out, the top price paid for Loves Grove ewes was £13.40 a head, and the lowest price £12.90, a thoroughly respectable result. A great deal of money changes hands at this sale, but it's far more than a commercial occasion. Most of the men lead lonely, isolated working lives, and it makes a real holiday for them to see old friends and exchange news. Christopher fell into conversation with the farmer who'd bought most of his ewes. He was pleased enough with them to come over to Loves Grove sometime later and purchase another 100. In all, the draft ewes contributed about £5,500 to the farm's income for the year. As September draws on, the rams are taken out of the flock and kept under John's watchful eye near his house at Llerneuaddau. After half a century of shepherding, he knows which characteristics make for good breeding.
A good head, long, and a good masculine head, and white and clean. He has a little bit of kemp, we call it, round here. More like a hair, you know, in the wool, like, which is sign of hardy sheep. It means a lot for hardiness in the sheep, you know, or for the winters up here, you know. Yes, for hardiness. Yes. And you got a good depth here, you know. A good long side. And not too long in the back. Strong on the shoulder. Yes. He's a 3-year-old sheep. He's got 2 years to go yet till he'll be in his glory, like.
A sheep's gestation period is 5 months. The start of next year's lambing season is controlled in advance by keeping the rams out of the flock till the end of October. This year, 200 of the older ewes have been specially selected to mate with 5 new rams which have been bought to improve the strain of the flock. The new rams and selected ewes are confined in a 200-acre paddock for the 5 weeks of the tupping period. Next spring, the distinguishing blue mark on the ewes will help to identify the lambs sired by the new rams so that the success of the investment can be assessed. In November, the cattle leave the mountain to winter at Loves Grove. The young calves and their mothers go by lorry, but the rest are walked all the way in batches of 100 or so. Christopher Evans introduced cattle into the farm's economy in 1970, and the herd has since grown to 500 head.
The cattle really are running on borrowed money, basically. Whereas the sheep, they're here when I came, so there's no charge on them at all. In terms of actual income, the cattle bring in more money, but they also cost more, probably.
Here, boy. Here, here. Here.
We wouldn't be able to farm without the hill subsidy as it is at the moment. It comes to quite a very substantial figure. The hill sheep and cow subsidy and the calf subsidy are in excess of £15,000 a year, which is, in a reasonable year, that should be one's profit. We've had a couple of bad years, 74, 75. We're back in I'd say we're back into a good year again this year.
The wether lambs live well in their last weeks, fattening themselves on fields of rape till they are bought by a meat wholesaler, 200 at a time, for about £15 each. Of the male lambs left uncastrated last May, only 9 have been picked out to be kept as breeding rams. The snow came again after Christmas, and it was 2 weeks before John and Erwyd could break through the drifts to the top of Plynlimon. Last November, John had his 65th birthday and was supposed to retire. In January, he still hadn't got round to giving up work, and Erwyd still hadn't taken over on the hill. There's talk now that John may work just 2 days a week and help out at busy times. But there's only one certainty. He belongs on the mountain, and he'll stay there while he still breathes.
You've got to be born to it, I think. Yes. I don't know. That's what I'm always hoping. I never want to be nuisance for nobody. I don't mind dropping where I am, the crows get me, as long as I'm no worry for nobody. That's my belief, like.
This Sunday at 6:55, a new 8-week series of One Man and His Dog begins. Wales have drawn Heat 1 of the BBC International.